Strasbourg, July 1518. A beautiful city, a hot summer, and one extremely strange problem. One woman named Frau Troffea stepped into the street and started dancing. No band, no wedding, no explanation. Just dancing. On day one, she looked delighted. Perhaps she had discovered the world's most exhausting hobby. And apparently she was committed. Day two arrived. Her feet hurt, her face was tired, but the dancing continued. At this point, even the shoes were asking for a vacation. Then, 3 neighbors joined in. Because when something looks completely mysterious, medieval logic apparently said, "Excellent, let's make it a group activity." Soon, there were 15 dancers. From above, Strasbourg looked less like a city and more like a very confused spinning wheel. Then 50 people were dancing. The streets became a festival nobody had planned, requested, or most importantly, been able to leave. 100 dancers. The crowd grew, the noise grew, and common sense quietly packed a suitcase and left town. The market was next. Food flew, bread toppled, and merchants learned that "please stop dancing near the stall" was not a successful business strategy. Children watched from the windows, trying to understand the scene below. Imagine asking your parents, "Why is everyone dancing?" and hearing, "We honestly don't know." The mayor called a council meeting. Maps came out, serious faces appeared. Someone probably brought a very serious hat. Nobody had a very serious solution. Finally, the mayor shouted, "Stop dancing!" which was a reasonable request, except the dancers were not exactly taking suggestions. The officials made their first big decision: hire musicians. Yes, musicians! To stop a dancing epidemic, they added music. This was not their best idea. The band played louder, faster, and with the confidence of people who had never been asked to solve a historical disaster before. A priest prayed for help. The dancers continued. The musicians continued. Somewhere, a sensible person quietly considered moving to another village. The priest tried holy water. Splash! For one beautiful second, everyone looked surprised. Then the dancing resumed, because apparently even the plague had a schedule. Next came a doctor and his trusty medical team, leeches. At the time, leeches were considered useful for almost everything. Headache? Leeches. Dancing? Also leeches. None of these solutions worked. People danced for days, grew weaker, and collapsed from exhaustion. The party had officially become a medical emergency. Even the graveyard was not safe from the strange movement. The whole city seemed trapped inside a rhythm nobody could hear and nobody could stop. Some dancers stumbled with dizzy eyes. Their bodies were exhausted, but the motion kept going. This was no longer fun. It was frightening, painful, and dangerously real. And Strasbourg was already suffering from famine. Food was scarce, harvests were poor, and people were living under enormous stress before the dancing began. Empty bowls tell the story better than any speech. When people are hungry, frightened, and desperate, the mind and body can react in ways nobody expects.
One theory points to rye. In damp conditions, rye can grow a fungus called ergot, a tiny organism with chemicals that affect the nervous system. If contaminated grain becomes flour, the result can cause strange sensations, muscle spasms, and confusion. A terrifying possibility, but not a complete answer. So yes, moldy bread may have played a role, but historians have a problem. The symptoms and circumstances do not fit the explanation perfectly. Another theory is mass psychogenic illness, sometimes called mass hysteria. Not imaginary illness, real symptoms triggered by extreme fear, pressure, and shared belief. One person moves, another sees it, a third panics. The brain copies patterns, especially when everyone around it expects something terrible to happen. Add famine, heat, religious fear, exhaustion, and rumors, and you get a perfect storm. Or more accurately, a very unfun dance storm. Centuries later, researchers still investigate the case. Was it fungus? Stress? Social contagion? Several causes working together? The giant question remains, why? History gives us clues, but not a neat little answer tied with a bow. We do know the event spread through crowded streets and communities. Ideas, fear, and behavior can travel astonishingly fast when people are under pressure.
Strasbourg was not a cartoon mystery. These were real people facing hunger, disease, confusion, and institutions that were guessing in public. The thumbnail version says one dancer, hundreds of followers, terrible medical advice, and one question nobody could answer. Look at the city again. Behind every tiny figure is a human being trying to survive a crisis that made absolutely no sense. Maybe the answer was fungus. Maybe it was trauma. Maybe it was both, and a dozen other pressures joining the same impossible rhythm. The dancing plague of 1518 remains one of history's strangest mysteries. So the next time someone says, just dance it out, perhaps ask for the evidence first. The end.